Welcome to the Celebration of You. I'm your host, Holly Dowling. I'm thrilled to share with you incredible people from all over the world who are living and leading extraordinary lives. From overcoming immense adversity to discovering the secret sauce to leading with courage and grace. Their stories are going to bring you hope and inspiration. Now, let the stories begin. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited about, just wait. I get excited about my guests. And sometimes it's as exciting for me as it is for you because I get the luxury and privilege of meeting amazing people around the world and actually serendipity. When you least expect it, the most amazing people come into your life. So hang on because you're about to hear from, I'm not even going to tell you yet because this gentleman is going to be connected at my hip for the rest of our lives. But before I get there and you get to hear his amazing voice and his passion, I have to say, I want to kick off this show with a huge, huge thank you. Everybody that knows me, I'm all about appreciation. I don't think we have enough of it in our world, but I'm going to take a moment to appreciate what I just found out, for all of you out there around the world that have been listening to the show. First of all, and always, I want to say thank you because you all know this was a mission put on my heart to share amazing stories of just incredible people living incredible lives and choosing to do that. But I did not know till a week ago when my beautiful, amazing team shared with me all of the countries that are listening to the show. So I'm giving you a special shout out and a thank you. So here we go. Thank you to every state in the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, Poland, Mexico, Australia, France, Spain, Netherlands, South Africa, Brazil, Chile, Russian Federation, Belgium, Italy, Egypt, Switzerland, Pakistan, Ireland, Philippines, Costa Rica, Czech Republic, Finland, Hungary, Turkey, Indonesia, Lebanon, Colombia, Argentina, Greece, Sweden, India, Norway, Singapore, Bulgaria, Malaysia, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, the Virgin Islands, Bosnia, Algeria, and there's some I can't even pronounce the name. So I'm just going to say, I'm blown away. I actually cried. So this is a huge shout out to all of you. Thank you for believing in the mission and believing that every person has a story. And when they share their story, it doesn't matter where we live and what we do. We're all human beings. So on that note, I would like to introduce you to this remarkable man who I've been blessed to get to know in the last, just recently. And actually, as I introduce you to, let me just tell you who it is. All right. Welcome, Jeffery Tobias Halter. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And out to a big shout out to all your global fans. I didn't know we'd be going that far today, so I'm excited.
I had no idea. I just do this because it's a mission, right? And so I had to do the shout out and the thank you. But you, my friend, so I have to laugh and go, so for everybody, they always like to know, how do I meet my guests? And frankly, sometimes it's in the craziest ways. Jeff and I have been kind of like following each other and interested in what each other's doing. And you'll soon find out why. And when I found out and I read one thing and I saw a picture of him, we're like sending each other messages, looking at each other's newsletters, right, and websites. And then I see a picture of this good looking man, in a suit with all this corporate background. And he's laying on his back with a pair of red high heels. I said, I have to know who this person is. And that is what got me. And then I found out, because of the passion I have with the work that I'm doing, both with men and women, but the women out there and begging and looking for men to be their champion. So you're about to meet who I believe is one of the biggest champions right now in the globe and in the United States, champion for women. So Jeff, thank you for being here and being a champion of women, my friend.
Well, Holly, thank you so much, and thank you for that great introduction. And I know we're going to be talking later, and so we'll just tease the why I'm wearing red high heels, and how they involve my work.
Yes.
And how I actually came upon that idea. But we'll tease that for now. We'll come back to that.
All right, we'll come back to it, but I got to keep people hanging in there. But what's fascinating is, this has become your mission, especially in the last 6 years. It's just become like more than a mission. It's your work and you're doing it all over. But, why don't you just tell us all right now, currently, what's keeping your time and what are you spending your time doing? Because you're on the road a lot. And then we'll go to the story behind the story of what got you here.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So I started my company, Y Women, the letter Y, Women, and Y represents the Y chromosome. And we'll talk a lot more about the why, WHY, reason that I do this work. But my work focuses on really helping companies create tightly integrated women's leadership strategies. And the reason I say that is many companies have a lot of very good but yet disjointed programs and processes that really don't come together in what business leaders would see as a true integrated business model. And so think about this, Holly, and we know this is the case. You've got employee resource groups, business resource groups, amazing groups of volunteers that come together, and they're very well-meaning. But Holly, in business, when was the last time some senior leader came down and said, we're going to do a major multi-billion-dollar acquisition, or we're going to introduce a multi-billion-dollar brand, but we're going to pick 50 really well-meaning volunteers. We're going to give them, I don't know, maybe $50,000 to pull this thing off. Go be successful. And that's what companies do regarding women. They say, oh, you've got a women's resource group, or we've got a women's high-pro program, and it's one element, but it's not connected to the business. It's not fully funded, resourced, et cetera. And so I help companies do that. I set up scorecards, measures, metrics, really bring a rigorous business process to it. That's about 75% of my work. And then I focus on engaging male leadership, which, men are still, pick a number, 75 to 85% of senior leadership. And so I talk to them about this integrated strategy. But at the same token, what I have found is advocacy comes from a personal connection. And we'll talk about that more later on the call. But we've got a lot of really brilliant men walking around who think they know what they need to do, but they're not advocates. And I think that's the difference between just a benign business knowledge and really becoming a champion and an advocate for advancing women. And that's the work that I do.
And that's the piece that got me, because it's like finally someone like you has decided to say, I'm stepping up, because there are a lot of amazing men out there that are saying, I want to help. I just don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. And so to become that advocate, you're almost doing a lot of the heavy lifting and saying, here's what it's going to take. I'm creating this charge and this, like literally a revolution, and helping them figure that out. Because, when you and I first talked, I said, it's amazing to me how I'll bring men, senior leaders on stage at women's events and just ask, please be here. For one, I want you to support and see what's going on. I also want to interview you. And what blows my mind is that the men that end up in tears saying, I never knew I'd sit here and cry, because I don't think I realized how important the women in my life have been. And I have a daughter, right? And to your point, when it becomes emotional connection, then that's when there changes, right? That's the shift of now I have my why, the WHY, why,
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us, so you have this amazing background that was so fun to hear about when you and I caught up, but I want to go back I want to go back to the beginning of, there's been a percolating like little nudge at you for your corporate life career. So take us back to that, one of those first beginning moments that was pivotal when you realized, what's going on?
Well, it's really funny, because if you had asked me now 17 years ago if I would be running a company focused on engaging men and women's leadership advancement, I would have laughed at you. I'm a straight old white guy. Why would I be doing this work? Why, quite frankly, would I be passionate about this work? But as I got into it in the kind of middle 2000s, it was funny. I would reflect back in my career, and there were actually kind of two pivotal moments when I realized I had some gender dynamics and gender epiphanies going on that I never really made a connection to. And so the first one of those, this was 1978, Rust Belt, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I graduated from college. I got married. It's just what you did in those days. I was 22. My wife was 20, and there were no jobs. So I took a job selling beauty supplies, full commission. You didn't work, you didn't get paid. And so I would call on beauty shops up and down the street all day long. And at the age of 22, and I didn't even have a term for it, I cracked the relational nature of women. And if you get one salon, they introduce you to all their friends, and their friends are the other hairdressers in town.
I love this.
and so I got really good at this, and I grew my business. Within 2 years, I was the number one rep in the country. I won a new car at the age of 24 for my sales productivity. By the age of 26, I had 50 people working for me in 6 states. And at that time, I felt a corporate restructure going on. We were acquired, and they did away with the legacy salespeople. But I took this knowledge of what I would call very relational-based selling, and I would go to work for Procter & Gamble in 1983. Now, we all have visions of 1983, the blue suit, the white shirt, the red tie. That's what women wore back in the day, the floppy bow tie. With the men, women all looked exactly the same at Procter & Gamble. And so we introduced Always Feminine napkins. Now think about this, Holly. This is the greatest feminine pad that a male engineer can build. Think about that just for a moment, because P&G makes amazing products. And they're so proud of their product that they want you to talk about them. And so a 97% male sales force.
I just love the visual.
Introduced Always Feminine napkins.
Oh.
And because the product works so well, we would stand in grocery store aisles. And we would have a Stay Free product on one side and the Always in the other. And we would pour blue water in both of them. And we were trained to grab the grocer's hand. And by the way, men always bought feminine napkins, the grocery buyers. There were no women buyers. And say, doesn't the dry weave feel softer? You cannot make this up.
I know you can't. I'm crying. I am laughing so hard.
And so, this is etched in my brain. The funniest part came after about 10 days, I ran into my first female buyer. Well, by now, I'm just breaking out into this rote sales presentation. And as I grab her hand to say, doesn't the dry weave feel softer? She stops and looks me in the eye and says, softer? Really? Have you ever worn one of these? And that's when I kind of went home and told my wife, I got to go do something else. I just can't do this job any longer. So my whole background is sales and sales management. Flash forward about 15 years, I had joined Coca-Cola. I was actually doing a major project running sales training at the Coca-Cola company. And we had what no company should ever go through. And that's a $200 million discrimination lawsuit. It was brought by race. It could have been brought by gender. This was back in the early 2000s. And if you recall, this was when Texaco had their big lawsuit. They had senior leaders using very disparaging remarks around employee. Well, Coke was not that lawsuit. Coke was guilty of really weak HR programs and processes. Oh, by the way, most that are still in place in most companies in America today. And what it says is you can't justify your hiring practices as being non-biased, your performance management system, job posting, compensation conversations, things like that. And so Coke was the first big lawsuit that revolved around really bad HR practices. And coming out of this, we also laid off 8,000 people. And so overnight, I went from running sales training to leading diversity education. And again, I'm a straight white guy, and I wondered what meeting did I not go to get put in charge of this project? Because we've all been. Yeah,
well, I have to ask you, was that a voluntold, or did you raise your hand for this, or did somebody?
This was completely voluntold.
Okay.
This was completely voluntold. And it was, for your listeners who've seen that really bad episode of The Office with the diversity training.
I have.
That's what this program was. I mean, it was just horrible. And I had to sit in my own class. I'm one of the facilitators, and I'm a hostage because I think this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But every day from people I knew and respected, I heard stories. I heard stories of racism, and I heard stories of sexism, and I heard stories of homophobia. And I had a story one day from a gentleman who was a good friend of mine I really respected. He had never shared this before, and this is in a class of 40 people. He was a black gentleman who ran our Columbus syrup ranch, and this is a well-paid position. He drives a white Jaguar and lives in a very nice suburb of Columbus, Ohio. And he's talking to the class saying, at least once a month, I am pulled over on my drive home from work for being nothing more than a black man in a nice car in a nice neighborhood.
Oh.
And this is way before, racial profiling hit the news, the last few years and everything else. So this has been going on for a long time. And he said, you go through every emotion possible, from outrage to despair. But he said the lowest day of his life is when he was driving and his 16-year-old son was next to him in the car. And all you can do in that moment is be a father, and you drop your hands in your lap and be as polite as you possibly can, because your son is going to get pulled over at some point, and how you react in that moment is the way your son's going to react. Oh. That story changed me, because I'm the father of a son. I'm the father of a daughter. And I knew my children would never have to go through that. And I had what they call a white male epiphany, where you realize what white male privilege is, and the world revolves around you, and why it's so important for us, the majority, to really come to embrace this, because we need to be the voice of this. We, the majority, whatever group you're in, that majority has to take an active role in advocacy. And I never saw myself as an advocate or a champion. But I heard this story, and I knew in that moment I had to do something about it. And so I started doing research. I became very passionate in this area. This was around the time Tom Peters was doing a lot of his work.
Yeah.
And I heard a webcast that I still remember to this day. It was probably 2005 on the purchasing power of women, and the fact no one got this. And so I started doing research into gender and differences. I'd spend 8 years in leadership development and diversity strategy. My last role with Coca-Cola was actually as director of diversity strategy, where now 10 years post-lawsuit, we had built so many best-in-class processes. I was actually taking them out to clients of the Coca-Cola company. So think about people like McDonald's or Sodexo or Kroger or people like that, to help them get better at doing this work. And that's kind of when I incubated this idea to say, companies really need to know how to do this, but so much of D&I today is still, it's still focused on race. And if we can't choose to have a conversation about our gender differences, which are the most simple to talk about and understand. They're not the most simple to talk about. They're certainly present every day for most people. Yeah. I chose to say, let's use this as a starting point. And let's choose to have deep conversations around gender. And then we can talk maybe about age, millennials, and then we can talk about race, and then we can talk about LGBT issues, and so I think there's a continuum. But here's what's fascinating in my work. Men don't want to have this conversation. I don't think that's a surprise to your listeners.
Right.
We see it, one, as a zero sum, but number two, we see it as no value added, because I can have a very nice career, Holly, without ever talking about this, without ever giving you honest feedback, and just kind of ignoring it. And that's not what leaders do. That's really weak, benign management. So men have to choose to have this conversation and acknowledge we're going to make mistakes. So assume good intent if you're a woman and I'm asking you questions. But importantly for men, women don't want to lead this conversation, especially when you're the only woman in the room. You can't be the flag bearer for all things women. And so you need male allies, not to help your voice, but if you're the only person bringing it up, it becomes a woman's thing instead of a business imperative.
Absolutely.
And so that's the work that I do, is really helping what I call ready now men, which I believe are up to 30% of men in companies, to do exactly what you mentioned really early on is, okay, Jeff, if you want me to be an advocate, what do you want me to do? What does it look like on a daily basis when I'm advocating for women? And so that's the work that I do. Dialed up for senior leadership and brought down into more operational terms for people in middle management.
So you know what I'd love? And thank you for taking us through the journey. And I was literally crying, just the visual of you standing in a grocery store, right? Like back in those days. And I'm like, it's just, and I told you the other day, I go, this is the story. This is what has kept you catapulting to what you're doing today, right? It's like you were willing to see something and have your eyes open and go, what is happening, right? You're right. How dare I even think I know what this feels like? And so I love that story. Right. I mean, I love it. And then you marched home and told your wife, you're like, what am I doing? And yet what has happened, if I look at your story and just listening to you, it's been a continuous journey where I believe you've been put in situations that have continued to leverage you being an advocate, although you didn't know it then, right? It's been continuing to build this champion advocate spark in you of where you are today. And when I think about what you're doing today and, sharing some of the great clients and all the work, take it down to really simple for me right now. I have two questions and I want your top of mind reaction to both. Number one, if you didn't have the time to have a male leader in a room for a whole day for a workshop or for an event, but you had his attention for 10 to 15 minutes and he said, Jeff, what's the most important thing I can do? What would you tell that person?
Yeah, this is, it's, believe it or not, it is the simplest thing in the world. Most leaders want to lead, and it's step 3 in the process. The first thing I want you to do is listen. Listen and have a genuine conversation. And so, Holly, let me tell you what that looks like. I want you to take a female colleague out to coffee, and I want you to ask one question. Tell me about your experience as a woman working here. What don't I know? And then let you talk. And you said 15 minutes. I'm going to push this to 30 because it just works better the longer you can listen. And then just listen. Just shut up and listen to what she says. Because in the first 5 to 10 minutes, you're not going to go really deep. You're going to be questioning why I want to know this. You're going to give me the politically correct answer. And this is really important for men to actively listen, don't become defensive, and don't say, well, that's the policy, or gosh, we couldn't do that, or blah, 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 blah. Just shut up and listen. And when you get to a natural break, say, and what else? What else don't I know? And that's giving her permission now to go deeper in a very genuine manner. And after another 10 minutes, say, is there anything else that you haven't talked about that I just don't understand or other men don't understand? That 30-minute exercise will tell you everything going on in your organization that you had no clue existed. And it's so powerful. And leaders want to lead when, in fact, they need to start by listening. And I'll give you a perfect example because, unconscious bias is in the news and, there's all this stuff going on. Well, I have to tell you, I work with a pharma company, and I'm not going to share their name. I've got a non-disclosure with them. But I was in a room doing some women's executive development in my work, and we were on a break. And this was about 60 women with PhDs in oncology and microbiology and things I can't even describe what these doctors do. And I said, I'm getting ready to have lunch with your senior leaders. Is there anything you'd like me to tell them.
Oh, wow.
And I have to tell you, this room erupted. Now, these were the brightest, smartest women I had ever been in a room in. And the things they told me just by me asking, my research is double checked. I'm expected to take notes. I'm expected to clean the lab. I'm expected to do all the administrative roles, even though I am senior to most of the people on the team or they report to me. And on and on and on.
Wow.
And I have to tell you, I can't tell you what biases women are facing in the workplace today, but you can.
Yes.
And it's very subtle. Yeah, there's some overt stuff going on out there, but it's not 1980s Mad Men, regardless of the visible vocal stuff we're seeing in the press right now. Most of these unconscious biases are very subtle. Many are unintended to be seen as, sexist, but, men just don't think about it. Men just don't process it that way. But if you want to know the top 5 to 10 biases in your company, all you got to do is ask women, and they'll rattle them off.
Wow. It's so true. And you know which one I'm thinking of? Because I just experienced this recently with a group of women in leadership at a very well-known global organization. And it was mind-boggling to me that there's still that unconscious bias that when a woman, no matter what age she is, chooses to take a small leave of absence because she's going to have a child or maybe 2, immediately senior leadership, male predominant, looks at that as that, well, they have decided to put their family before their career. So immediately they are looked at as take her out of the pool for the next promotion, and it has nothing to do with that. But yet it's that immediate, right? That unconscious bias is we assume that means that they've changed their priorities. And that's been a real struggle. I mean, this goes on for generations, but it's still happening today, Jeff. Women are still struggling with that and battle that. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yep. And that's where, and sadly it goes back to, it's actually on both parties, right? Good leaders, and this is the whole role of sponsors, where, Holly, if I'm your sponsor, when you come back from maternity leave, it's incumbent on me to come to you and have a really, frank conversation, because that's what mentor sponsors do. And it's, Holly, I want to support you. I want to know what you want to do. I have your back. If you say, you know what, you want to power down for a couple of years because you want to do X, Y, and Z, I'm good with that. But I need to know how to best represent you. That's what sponsors do. And by the same token, if you don't have a sponsor, it's really incumbent on the woman to go into the ELT and say, hey, look, I'm fully committed. Here's my plan. We had talked about an international development role in 3 years. I still want to honor that. But, or being very mindful to say, you know what? Yeah, I am going to take a year off, but I want to re-engage full steam ahead, and being very vocal and visible about that and telling as many people as you can.
Absolutely.
Because you're exactly right. I'm going to assume you're choosing to slow down, when in fact your husband may be staying at home.
Exactly.
It's interesting. There are women who love the lean in concept. There are women who hate kind of the lean in concept because it puts so much burden on the women. What it does is it really articulates kind of this strategy for saying, look, don't opt out until you reach a position where you truly have some power. Because whether you know it or not, by the time you reach director and start your family, you've got more resources. And being a director, you actually have more flex time than if you're in a individual contributor role. And so the world kind of blossoms for you if you can get to the right level. It's still hard work, but don't opt out on your way up. Opt out when or don't opt out, but, renegotiate every step that you go up.
Absolutely. Well, and this is interesting because I think you and I talked about this the other day, but something I'm very passionate about. And it's such an interesting, the weave and the blend of the position you're taking to help men be advocates at the same token. And we had this, I said, sponsorship is a big word. And it's also a very vanilla word. A lot of people don't know what that means. And what it means to me is helping women understand that your sponsor, if you were my sponsor, Jeff, I can't ask you to be my sponsor because you're going to be waving the flag for me and be my advocate in the boardroom when I'm not there. If you don't know what I want and I don't know what I want, how can you do that for me? And I think where women have been able, and part of my passion is to empower women to own their voice, figure out what you stand for, know what you want. And it doesn't mean you have to figure it out tomorrow, but you can't ask somebody to help you go there if you don't know what it is. They can't read your mind. So,
absolutely.
Right. So I think there's just it's back to so cliche to say the marriage here, but it is a marriage. It's about, you also, women have to stand up for yourselves and get clear about who you are and give yourselves permission to say, you know what, if this is what I want, nobody's going to read my mind. I have to start throwing my name out there and put my name in the ring. But I also have to know, is that what I want? Right? Like, am I doing it because I'm expected to do it? Or wait a minute, I want to be going down this lane and I've never told anybody that. So I think, there's so many different directions we could go here, but I have to tell you something, go back to those 3 questions. And I want to wrap this up with those because what I loved about that moment, I had a great visual of literally sitting at the coffee shop and having a man and woman sitting there and a true leader saying, tell me what I need to know about this company, what it's like working here as a woman, right? And the way that you just laid that out so simple. And I just wonder, it's so simple, and yet the old line, it's such common sense, but it's not common practice.
Yeah.
Right? And in line with what you said, one of the things that I spend a lot of time on is empowering leaders, men and women, about, to me, we could spend a whole day talking about the art of listening. It's about asking questions and then, zip it, shut up and listen. But knowing how to ask a few great intentional questions can have an entire dynamic and a whole different shift on the response of what you're going to get. So maybe we hold that one for when I do an interview with you and we do a whole thing on the questions, right? Because it could be so much fun on that. I want to know, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No. I did want to build on one thing because the model that I use, so I mentioned it's listen, learn, and lead. This actually comes out of Male Champions of Change out of Australia. So I want to give them a shout out because they're doing great work. But so first you listen, then you lead, then you learn, right? Build your business case, learn what you don't understand, lead. But then the fourth element that they don't have that I'm saying you have to have is after you listen, learn, and lead, you have to have the will. And the will is what drives advocacy. And so that's what moves you to a champion. Because I joke that advancing women today is a lot like diet and exercise. Everybody knows exactly what we need to do. I need to eat less and I need to exercise and get active. But do I have the will to do that every day? And so everyone knows what needs to happen to advance women. Oh, by the way, it's a very complicated algorithm because it's not one thing. It's as individual as every woman, millennial, and employee that you have. But having the will to become an advocate circles back to that personal connection piece that we talked about earlier. And I know we're getting close to wrap up.
Yeah.
But one of the things you had asked about, what are those daily things? So I actually have something you can download on my website. It's the Father of Daughter Initiative. And it's 10 things men can do to demonstrate advocacy for women by doing this for their daughters. Because this is another epiphany. As I talk to women, they look at me just incredulous that, what do you mean men don't understand this? And believe it or not, we don't. We never make the connection that if we're not advocating for women today, what legacy are we leaving for our daughters? And yet, as a boomer, I wanted to raise a strong daughter. I supported her, whether it was music or sports, made sure she went to a great college. And when my daughter graduates and makes 87 cents or 83 cents to my son, I choose to do nothing. I choose not to become an advocate when, in fact, I need to be outraged that society values my daughter less than my son. And that's where advocacy comes from. And just by telling that story, it allows men to have epiphanies.
Yes.
And it goes back to what you talked about, having men on these panels talking about their stories. But that's where this really is. And it sounds so simple and it's so hard. We never make the connection.
Oh, just hearing you talk about that, just going back to your daughter right now. And I hope everybody out there listening, actually, I want to wrap this up and I want you to tell everybody, I have two things, Jeff. I want you to tell everybody how to get in touch with you if they want to know more and anything that they want to know, reach you. And where they can download these 10 tips. But you know what I think so profound is that statement coming from you, actually more than a woman, actually is so powerful right now. To hear you say, right, that is an outrage that society would value my son over my daughter, right? I mean, and yet to hear that, I think everybody listening could be covered in goosebumps going, wow, we're still living in that world. And it takes people stepping up and being advocates. You're right. Now I need to be an advocate. And it starts when your daughter's young. Don't wait till she graduates, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So tell us where everybody can reach out to find out more.
So my website is women.biz, B-I-Z. You can go and download materials. There's a bunch of videos. My TED Talks are there. Most importantly, there's two things. One is the Father of Daughter initiative that you can download for free. Print it out, sign it, put your daughter's name on it. There are similar versions for women advocating for women and just advocating for women. So you don't have to be a father of a daughter to make a commitment to advocate for women. So that's a big piece of it. And then also, so much of my work focuses on corporate America. And so if you run a business resource group, employee resource group, you're listening to this, I have a 30-point assessment around the state of women in your organization. It's open-ended, it's free. Go ahead and download that and use that to start a deeper conversation in your organization. I'll give you one more thing also, and you can go to my website and sign up for this. Holly, one of the key things I want to do is create conversations around gender. And so I have a newsletter that comes out about every 3 weeks called Gender Conversation Quick Starters.
I just got it today.
And
I was looking at it.
You just got it today?
Yes, I saw it. I love it. Yep.
And it takes 3 current articles, hot topics that might be 3 paragraphs long. It might be a video and 3 questions. And they go from easy to hard. But the intent is download this, share it with your team. This is basically a staff meeting in a box for 12 months. It's absolutely free to start to have gender conversations. Watch this video and let's talk about it and let's get points of view. That's how we're going to start to drive real change. And I have found this to be just overwhelmingly successful because it's all about how do you keep the conversation alive?
Yep.
Well, you do it by once a month. We're gonna have a little lunch and learn, and we're gonna talk about this.
It's brilliant.
And I think it's
brilliant.
It's really driving change in organizations.
I love it.
One conversation at a time.
And I saw it today and I thought it's what we talked about. I mean, how simple, and it doesn't cost anybody any money. So if you're sitting there at an organization and there's no budget to bring somebody in to help facilitate these conversations, here you go. Heavy lifting done for you. Here's some wonderful questions. Just do it. A lunch and learn, whatever that is. I think that is absolutely, and it starts organically there, Jeff, to your point, and I have to wrap this up, but I have one thing I ask all my guests, and I was thinking about for you. I would love for you to share with us if you were to go back and give I typically say 25-year-old self, but for you, I might say 22 because you had some monumental things happening. Your 22 or 25-year-old self advice based on who you are today and what you know. What advice would you give that young man?
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I do want to tease this because we didn't get to talk about it. So you're going to have me on again to find out the red shoe story.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll do another one.
Because we didn't get to talk about that. Yeah. What I would tell my 25-year-old self is you don't have to be right 100% of the time. And the reason I say that is I was a sales guy, and I always fought for my customers. And I don't know that I had the business maturity to take the customer point of view, or to take the company point of view. And so it's just this, I call it business immaturity, and you just don't know what you don't know. And until you really spend some time, and the reason I say that is I have learned some very hard lessons in my life that I could have spared myself had I taken that advice. But by the same token, Holly, I don't think I would be in this place today unless I had that fighting spirit. And now instead of fighting for my customers, I'm fighting for women. So in hindsight, 12 moves and selling feminine napkins and doing all kinds of weird stuff, I can honestly say I wouldn't change a lot. You know what I would say? I would have said, don't sell the Apple stock 8 years ago when it wasn't doing anything. That would have been the other advice. That would have been the other advice. Turn 50, don't sell the Apple stock.
Yeah, that caused a little pain I felt the pain there, babe. Well, you know what I think? I think what I'm going to do is I love that you wrapped up with that. I'm going to take the challenge. So to everybody out there that is amazing and just listens, and you always send comments and you send notes, please let us know. I'd love to have Jeff on again, and we will leave the infamous story of the red heels, and maybe we'll get him to share some of these hard lessons learned, and we'll take that approach on round 2. How does that sound, Jeff?
That sounds awesome.
I love it. Thank you, friend. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and can't wait to see what is next that we're going to collaborate on. Bye. Thank you for joining me for another awesome celebration of you. If you were inspired by this story, please share it with your family and friends and hashtag Your Story Matters. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment on iTunes. And absolutely, please come to my website, hollydowling.com. Leave a comment there too, and while you're there, pick up your free gift. Most importantly though, just remember that your life is a gift from God. What you do with it is your gift back.